Hello everybody, welcome back to Read and Reread. Today I'm doing a tag that was an original tag created by my friend Pat from Book Chat with Pat in celebration of her reaching 2,000 subscribers. And that could not happen to a lovelier person. Congratulations to Pat, it's a wonderful thing and I'm so happy that your channel is growing and thriving. And she has created this tag with some thoughtful prompts that focus on joy and gratitude. And she made this a few weeks ago, but the tag has been running around through the Booktube community, and I finally have a little moment to make it myself, so I'm happy to do that. And I thought today was a good day to do it, to distract myself and anyone who chooses to watch from some of the turmoil and chaos and anxiety that today, election day, might be producing in your mind, in your heart, in your soul. I'm thinking good thoughts. I'm wearing blue. Let's talk about joy and gratitude and celebrate Pat, a truly positive person and just a dear friend. I know that there'll be something at the end of the prompts about tagging people. Pat tagged an immense list of people, and then the tag has gone forth and multiplied. So I know I've seen a lot of people, and there's a bunch of videos I haven't even seen yet because some people made them when I was out of town and I've gotten behind. So if you have a channel and you have not done this tag, please consider yourself tagged. If you don't have a channel but you want to answer any or all of the questions, you can do it in the comments. All right, the first part is joy. And here's the quotation that Pat provides. Let's be grateful to the people who make us happy. They are the charming gardeners who make our souls blossom. Marcel Proust. And the first prompt in this section is, name an author whose books bring you joy or discuss a specific book that made you feel joyful. I'm not like a real cozy book reader, but every now and then I do love to read a book that is kind of on the milder side, the gentler side, the more positive or uplifting side. And now is a great time for books of this nature. So here are just a few. I really loved Still Life by Sarah Winman. And you know that I approach longer books carefully, but this didn't feel long at all. And it was a surprise joy because I didn't really know much about this author going into it. This was a book I've mentioned in the past. This is one of my all-time best thrift store purchases. It's an absolutely pristine copy of Still Life that was sitting in a thrift store for $1 or $2, and I just thought it was so pretty. And I quickly looked it up and saw that it had kind of a high rating. It looked like it was going to have good reviews. So I took a chance, and then I found out how wonderful it actually is. So this is a book about a young soldier in World War II who has an encounter with a couple of people just brought together by circumstances, and it leads to him inheriting a villa in Tuscany. And he decides to take a risk and go there. Things are not going that well for him in London. He comes back from the war. His wife has had a child with somebody else, but he ends up being this child's father and bonding very closely with her. So he takes his daughter and a couple other friends in tow that decide to go along, and they go and they move to Italy. And it's about found family. It's has multi-generational, well, not multi-generational, but it's the same group of people, but it goes across several decades in time, and it's funny, it's joyful, it's not light and fluffy though. There are serious topics and character growth, and but it's just really good. You just get immersed in it. The setting is fabulous. It's not a fluff ball, but it is overall, I would say, a pretty happy book. Just an eccentric group of people that make a found family. I have two runners up. The Strongness Dinner by Peter Benson, about Ed Beach, a man who is in business with his dad in the construction service. They renovate kitchens and whatever. They're carpenters, and he takes a job in the Orkney Islands renovating a house that a man and his sister want to put up for sale after their father has passed away. That's the basic structure, but his character is so... I just love Ed Beach, this character. He was one of my favorite characters last year, and just the living inside his head and his point of view, and you want good things to happen for him, and they kind of do, and that's all I want to tell you about. But it's a feel-good book that, again, it's not too fluffy, and you find out why it's called the Strongness Dinner. All somewhere in the middle of the book you're thinking, why is this book called the Strongness Dinner? But you do find out by the end, and I just loved this book and this character. And then last but not least, also The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle by Matt Cain. This was a book I read a couple of years ago. I took it with me on a trip when I needed a book that I thought was going to be on the happier side. And it did fit the bill. Again, there are some serious topics in here. There's a man named Albert who has worked for the post office for decades and decades, lived with his mother and his elderly cat, and he's been in the closet for all these decades. Something happened in his teenage years that was so traumatic that he never came out. And now, upon the passing of his mother and the cat, which happens right at the beginning, it's not a spoiler, and the fact that he's facing compulsory retirement, Albert makes some changes. He decides that mid-60s is definitely not too late to do something else with the rest of your life. He comes out, and it is, again, he always is thinking the worst thing is going to happen. He finds out that the world has changed while he has cloistered himself inside his house and inside his mind. And he makes all kinds of new friends and has funny adventures, but there's also a serious undertone because he wants to find, well, it was a boy, but now it's a man. He wants to find the person that he lost track of all those years ago. And he doesn't know what's going to become of it, but he kind of sets out on a mission to reconnect with the love that he lost. There's a part in the back of my book that has some interviews that Matt Cain did with men, real men of Albert's age, and their experiences in the previous decades being kids and teenagers and young men in a more difficult time to be a gay man in the UK, and how things have changed over the decades. And that was also kind of a nice, interesting bonus to my copy. The second part of the prompt is discuss something about Booktube that you find joyful. I think every single person has talked about the community, and I have to say the same thing. The part that I find joyful is all of the friends that I have made on Booktube. I expected when I started my channel, I was looking for connection. I was looking for like-minded readers. And I thought, if I get a group of people that like the same kind of books that I do, and they're kind of on the same wavelength as me, and I get comments and we talk back and forth. That was the idea. I didn't know how much better it was even going to be than that I was going to make actual friends, that I was going to form connections, have buddy reads and real life meetups and friendships that were about not just books, and just the support of the community, and how it just keeps on going, and I find new people all the time, and the other booktubers, and just the breadth of people that I have met and become acquainted with, and even the people that I'm not really personally connected to, but I enjoy their content all around, not just my country, but around the world. It's just absolutely enhanced my life. All right, so the next part is friendship. Kindred spirits are not so scarce as I used to think. It's splendid to find out there are so many of them in the world. That's Lucy Maud Montgomery from Anne of Green Gables. I thought about using Anne of Green Gables in this tag. Somehow she didn't quite make the cut, but that book would fit probably into all these prompts. And I love that book. The prompt is discuss a book that focuses primarily on friendship. I have Charlotte's Web, because that just came to my mind right off the bat, and especially the friendship between Wilbur and Charlotte, and what Charlotte does for Wilbur in the course of the book. And then the ending, oh my gosh, the infamous ending that leaves you in tears, but that leaves you also with that friendship going forward, the new friendship between Wilbur and Charlotte's children. It's also would fit with the community one, because Charlotte inspires everyone to band together to save Wilbur's life, and everyone has a role in that. And I guess it begins with Fern and Wilbur, and when she speaks up and saves him from the slaughter. But Charlotte's Web, I hope I didn't do any spoilers there. I know some people probably have actually never read Charlotte's Web. It is a children's book. It's one that I have to read every several years once again, and that I cherish. Also, more recently, and I've talked about this book many times, is Leonard and Hungry Paul, about a relationship between two guys in their 30s who both live at home and like to play board games. They're just two people that are pretty content with their lives. Some changes begin to ripple through during the book, and they have to make some decisions about whether to make any changes. But really, they're just two content people that like their families. The conflict is more about whether the risk of interrupting anything in the status quo. There's some really terrific conversations in this book about the risks and benefits of rocking your own boat. And it's a quiet gem, and I love this book by Ronan Hession. The next section is laughter. And the quotation is, "There's nothing like deep breaths after laughing that hard. Nothing in the world like a sore stomach for the right reasons." Stephen Chbosky, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. The prompt is, discuss an author or a specific book that made you laugh. Okay, are you ready? Here it is, Catcher in the Rye. This book makes me laugh out loud every time I read it. It's also one of the saddest books that I perpetually reread. And the two things cannot be extricated from one another. Holden's narrative voice in this book and some of the sarcastic things he says absolutely crack me up. They cracked me up when I was 14. They crack me up now when I'm 58. I always laugh at some of Holden's comments. Just equally funny and devastating every time I read it. I'm not going to spend time trying to sell Catcher in the Rye yet again, but it is my all-time favorite novel, the book that I've read more times than anything else. I'm going to put a link down below. Pat recently did a whole video dedicated to Catcher in the Rye, and her love of it on a personal level, and also her experiences as an English teacher sharing it with students. And she just really encapsulates exactly how I feel about the book too. So I'm going to leave that down there in case you are interested. If you haven't read it, or you read it years ago and it didn't really stick with you, and you wonder why certain people always mention Catcher in the Rye, maybe that will give you a better feel and flavor for the experience of it. Something that made me laugh in a nostalgic manner this year was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is another book that we read in my band book club at the library. And this one, it's really corny humor. It's kind of out of date, but some of it did make me laugh again. And it also, I felt nostalgic because I read this first when I was probably maybe like 13, and the type of humor in here, I thought it was uproariously funny at that time. Now it's just it's amusing, and it's kind of a fun look back at what made me laugh back then. So, but it's science fiction, but it's a parody of other science fiction and things in society, and it's banned for being very irreverent about God and religion, and it's just kind of a romp, and it's the beginning of a series. But I enjoyed my reread, and it was funny all over again. And then there's also the category of, why was this funny? Is there something wrong with me? And that's my most recent read, All Yours by Claudia Pinheiro, that I'm reading with a group of people, and we were all just kind of delighted and caught off guard by the dark humor in this book about a woman who seems to be probably a sociopath, who is on the path of discovering the truth about her husband's infidelity and gets involved in covering up a crime. That's as much as I'm going to tell you, but I did not know it was going to be so funny, and that her point of view was going to be kind of gasp-inducing while I read it. It's short, it's fast. Everybody who started reading it has not been able to stop. We've galloped through it. Now we're having a really good time talking about it. All right, the Wi-Fi dropped for a split second, but it dropped everything I had set up for looking at the prompts. So here we are, we're back. We cannot live only for ourselves. 1,000 fibers connect us with our fellow men. Herman Melville. And there's 2 prompts here. The first one is discuss a book where the idea of community is important. I thought of 2 things. First of all, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, which was in my top 10 last year. It is absolutely beautiful story about a community back in the earlier 20th century in, was it Pottstown, Pennsylvania. It starts with a scene in 1972, and then it goes back. A skeleton is found in a well, and so then we flash back, and we get the story of this community. It is a community that is a combination of Black and Jewish residents that have sort of been pushed over to live on this hill, separated from the white community in the same area. And they band together to save a young Black child who is deaf, who is picked up by the state, who believes he needs to be institutionalized. And that's just kind of the core of it. It's really about all of these people and their relationships in this town, current and past, and lively personalities and backstories. It's a wide cast of characters. And the centerpiece person in the story is Chona, a Jewish woman who runs a store in the town. Her relationship with her husband and the legacy of her kindness and her ability to reach out and connect with so many people across all the different parts of this community. And you cannot miss out on McBride's piece at the end about the real life person who inspired this whole novel for him. All right, on a different vibe, but very much about community, is Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgigshig Rice. I read this last year in November as a selection by an Indigenous author. And then after that, a sequel came out, Moon of the Turning Leaves. And these are all about community, but it's a dystopian story. It's a post-apocalyptic story. So it's very, very tense. And it's not like a happy wee or joyful, uplifting kind of thing. It's about survival. At the start of winter, in a small village in Canada, an Indigenous community suddenly gets cut off. The electricity's out, the phones are out, and at first they're not particularly worried because this happens kind of often when snowstorms and things start in the winter. But as it goes on, they realize something has happened in the more urban world. Something that they're geographically kind of distanced from has occurred, and they start to get a more sense of it because some people start to kind of trickle in from other places. And the community aspect is something's happened, they're not sure what, but it's serious, and they're going to need to band together to get through what is going to be a really tough winter. And some people in this community have purposely retained and developed traditional skills that would allow them to survive better than other people who have relied on modern conveniences. And they have to make decisions. There's a series of conversations and meetings in this book between people where they have to grapple with, well, what is our role as a community? What is our responsibility of care to people who chose not to be prepared? How do we distribute and share our resources? And then there's some other things that happen about threats from the outside world, but that sense of community and having to make choices about how to care for and survive together. And then the story continues in the second book, where survivors of this event have relocated and they have formed a community. It's a number of years later, and it's really interesting to see how they have established a new way of life. So that's my choice for community. And then the next section is gratitude. And the quotation is from Twelfth Night that I recently read by Shakespeare, and it is, "I can no other answer make but thanks and thanks." And the prompt is, name a book in which a character demonstrates real gratitude, or name a book that left you feeling a sense of gratitude. Is it too soon? Is it too soon for A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Surely it's not too soon. I've been out in the stores the past few days and the Christmas music is playing freely. They always put the stuff out early, but I think people are going harder on it this year. I think people are needing a little Christmas right this very minute. I'm going to think that rather than they're just trying to grab my dollars right away and jolly me into this mood. But it's just kind of funny when you go to the store and it's 88 degrees and everyone's wearing shorts and flip-flops and Christmas music is playing and woolly socks are hanging out. But that's kind of the current situation. I'm kind of all in for it. So, but the very first book that came to mind, and it might not be the most creative choice, but A Christmas Carol. It's a great place to start with Dickens. It's a great Dickens for kids. It's a great reread as well. I reread it. I reread it every few years. I don't read it every Christmas. But of course, Ebenezer Scrooge is an old miser, but he hasn't always been that way. And when the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future visit him on Christmas Eve and show him the kernels of himself from the past, that he wasn't always a person devoid of joy and generosity and love and gratitude. Something is reawakened in him. And he also gets to see how other people are living, that people with very little financially or materially also are experiencing joy and gratitude and generosity. And even when talking and thinking about him and when he is not there, that people have some grace in their hearts for him as well. So all of these things, I'm greatly compressing the plot, but all of these things fan up some almost dead embers of humanity in his heart. It's a book that you cannot miss the point. That's why it's such a great starting point. It's a great, reading it or watching any adaptation of it. Last year we watched the Muppet one, which is a remarkably faithful adaptation. Stage shows of it. There's reasons why it comes around. It can be a little bit corny, but it's just really good. And if you read the book, there's Dickens humor, Dickens characters, and I think it exemplifies joy and gratitude. All right, that is the end of the tag. Like I said, go out and spread some joy and gratitude of your own. You could do the tag. You could answer some questions in the comments. You could go and watch Pat's original video or anybody else's video that has come along. And I hope that you yourself have a joyful day and try not to be too stressed. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.